"You can't touch me! Do you know who I am?" The entitled Brat's voice ripped through the courtroom like a whip, echoing off the wooden panels as he strutted in with a grin wide enough to split his face. He didn't just walk, he paraded. Each step a performance of arrogance. Each glance a reminder that he thought the law was nothing but theater staged for his amusement. He lifted his chin, looked around the gallery, and smirked at the hushed crowd like a king inspecting his subjects. To him, this wasn't court. It was his playground. But what he didn't realize was that today, for the first time in his life, he would face a reckoning. For today, sitting high on the bench, was a black woman who embodied everything he had mocked, underestimated, and trampled on. Before I unfold this story, kindly hit the subscribe button and tell us where you're watching from. We want to see how far this video reaches. Now, let's begin. Judge Evelyn Carter sat with a poise that could silence a storm. Her robe draped across her shoulders not as cloth but as armor, the gavel resting in her hand like the final word of truth itself. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the room not with intimidation but with authority that demanded respect. To the Brat, she was just another obstacle, another official to sneer at, another formality he believed his father's money could sweep aside. But to everyone else in that room, she was more than a judge. She was a symbol. She was a woman who had risen from the streets, where justice was often denied, where the color of her skin had once been treated as a barrier, not a badge of power. Every bias, every dismissal, every time someone told her she didn't belong, had carved her into the woman who now sat behind the bench unyielding, uncorrupted, and immovable. The Brat slouched into his chair, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. His shoes gleamed under the fluorescent lights, polished to perfection by his servant's hand. He leaned back, arms stretched, legs crossed, flashing a grin that seemed to say, "This is already over." The gallery murmured, shifting uneasily. They knew his reputation. Everyone did. He was the son of a family that never heard the word no. He was the boy who drove drunk and left wreckage behind, yet never saw a day of consequence. He was the man who humiliated teachers, bullied classmates, and sneered at authority, because every time the system had bent, every time the law had folded. But today, there was no folding. Judge Carter's gaze swept over him once, and in that quiet glance was a weight heavier than his entire family name. She raised her gavel, and with one thunderous crack, the court came alive. Proceedings began, but the Brat treated them like background noise. His lawyers, sharp in their suits, rose with the air of men who thought they owned the system. They cited technicalities, they danced with language, they wrapped his sins in ribbons of excuses, they spoke of youth, of misunderstandings, of lessons learned. They painted him as a victim of circumstance, not a predator of privilege. But Judge Carter was not listening to their performance. She was listening to the truth. Her eyes never wavered from the Brat's smirk, and her ears caught every tremor in the voices of the witnesses. One by one, they came forward. A young woman whose scholarship dreams were crushed when he mocked and sabotaged her. A worker whose family was left broken after one of his reckless nights behind the wheel. A neighbor who had lived in fear of his harassment, his laughter echoing through their walls. Each testimony was a blade slicing through his armor, each story a stone on the scales of justice. At first, he laughed. He tapped his fingers, yawned, leaned back as if their pain was a boring movie he had already seen. He whispered jokes to his attorneys, smirking at their discomfort. But as the hours passed, the atmosphere shifted. The gallery grew still, leaning forward, listening not just to the pain but to the strength of the voices rising. These were no longer victims trembling at the feet of wealth. They were citizens emboldened by the presence of a judge who would not dismiss them. Their voices grew firmer. their details sharper, their stories undeniable. And for the first time, the Brat's smile faltered. His lawyers stammered. Their confidence cracked as Judge Carter cut through their arguments with surgical precision. Every attempt to spin the story was dismantled, every polished phrase broken down to its hollow core. She didn't shout, she didn't scowl, she simply spoke with the kind of calm that was more terrifying than rage. It was the calm of someone who knew the truth, who carried the law not as a shield for the powerful, but as a sword for the silenced. The Brat shifted in his seat. His tapping fingers slowed. His eyes darted to the gallery where once victims now sat straighter, stronger, empowered by the unraveling of his mask. His arrogance was cracking, and in its place, fear seeped in quiet, creeping, undeniable. By late afternoon, the tension was thick enough to choke. The lawyers had run out of tricks, the testimonies had painted an unbroken chain of entitlement and harm, and the Brat no longer laughed. His suit, once perfect, now wrinkled under his restless movements. His jaw clenched, his eyes avoided the bench, and his hands, once stretched wide in arrogance, now clasped tightly together. Then it came. The moment that would carve itself into the memory of everyone present. Judge Carter lifted her papers, the courtroom falling into a silence so sharp it could cut glass. She began to speak. Her voice was calm, deliberate. Every word weighted with the gravity of truth. She spoke of responsibility, of accountability, of a life spent trampling others under the belief of invincibility. She spoke of the duty of the court not to shield arrogance, but to dismantle it. She spoke of the law not as a tool for the privileged, but as a promise to the people. The Brat's breathing quickened. His eyes darted, desperate for rescue, but none came. His lawyers stared down at their notes, defeated. The gallery leaned forward, hardly daring to breathe. And then Judge Carter's words fell like thunder. Guilty. The verdict rang out, echoing through the chamber, stripping away every ounce of arrogance left in him. The gavel struck with finality. The sound was not just wood against wood, it was justice crashing down, undeniable and absolute. The Brat's face drained of color, his mouth opened, but no words came. Shackles were brought forward, cold metal clasped around his wrists, and the clink of chains replaced the swagger of his earlier entrance. The boy who had stormed in yelling, "You can't touch me," was now silent, broken, humbled. The gallery exhaled. It was not applause, not chaos, it was relief. A collective breath of justice long delayed but finally delivered. Victims wiped tears, strangers nodded, and whispers of gratitude filled the air. Judge Carter sat steady, her face calm, her eyes unflinching. She had not sought applause. She had sought truth, and truth had won. As he was led away, the Brat glanced back once, his smirk forever erased, his arrogance replaced by fear. He had finally learned the lesson he thought he was immune to. Arrogance may laugh in the face of the world, but it will never laugh in the face of justice. And that day, justice wore the face of a black woman who refused to bow to power. And that is how an entitled Brat who thought he was untouchable was shattered by the gavel of Judge Evelyn Carter. Thank you for watching this story. If you want more satisfying moments where arrogance meets its match, hit the subscribe button, drop a comment, and tap the next video waiting in the description. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.